This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. It's episode 330 of the Craft Beer and Brewing podcast, and in this second of our two-part series of Best in Beer 2023 podcasts, I am joined by each of the 5 writers who shared their personal top 10s of the year in our Best in Beer issue, which is out now, from contributing editor Kate Bernot and managing editor Joe Stange to New York-based writer Courtney Iseman, Southern California beer humorist Alex Kidd, and the renowned author and pastry beer fanatic sitting across from me now, Stan Hieronymus. Welcome back to the podcast, Stan.
It's always great to be here, although I think you're going to explain what here means for us.
Here's a different place than we've ever recorded a podcast before. Certainly you and me, and we've recorded this segment in past years. This is the third time that we've done a segment on the Critics List. We did in our office a couple of years ago. We met up in Niwot on a snowy day at Fritz Family Brewers last year and recorded this. But for this one, we decided to just, record it in Mexico.
And it was a fun trip down.
It is still a fun trip down. It's a trip in progress. We're recording this after in Mexicali, Mexico, where we both judged for the past couple of days at the Copa Baja Mexicali, alongside an all-star crew of American and Mexican brewers and beer judges. It really was a killer crew of people down here.
Yes. Yeah, they've gone out of their way. Their thinking is they want to have people who will be frank about the quality of their beer, and that's a way to make their beer better. And it overall, on average, the average beer was better than last year. The best beers were better than the best beers. Unfortunately, the worst beers are still the worst beers.
It's pretty typical for a competition, but it was also fun to sit shoulder to shoulder with some great Mexican brewers and judge together, and also help understand these beers together, understanding new spices. Of course, we judged yesterday 2 categories together: wood smoked and historical beer, and then some spiced beer. Of course, we got a lesson in Mexican spices from our Mexican judge partners, right, which was hugely educational and eye-opening and a lot of fun. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we walk through Stan's Critics List later in the episode, but first, a little explanation about these lists, the motivation behind them. In a broad sense, we firmly believe that any concept of best, so we create a best issue. Any concept of best is very relative, contextual, constantly changing, and constantly evolving. It's always a moving target. All of us exhibit our own local, regional, and national biases. It's incredibly important for all of us to broaden our horizons, to try to think about beer, craft beer, in this as expansive a way as possible. And that's why within our approach to the Best in Beer issue, we have 3 components of it. That's our editor's picks for the 20 best beers of the year. That's based primarily on our blind reviewing, almost always actually entirely on our blind reviewing process, both the judged scores throughout the year in the magazine, as well as our kind of wild card taste in process for the Best in Beer issue itself. All of that is blind review based and taste based, and depends on the beers that breweries send us throughout the year. The second component is our reader's choice lists that are made up from the thousands of responses to our annual reader survey that readers and listeners out there submit to us. That is the popularity contest component of the competition, right? But also an interesting one to gauge the tenor on things and also understand how trends change. We ask about packaging formats. It's been amazing to watch. We watch about styles. And so it's an interesting way to kind of track consumer sentiment year over year. Also a valuable way to think about best. The third part of it, which we also really love, is tapping into the brains of folks that are paid to pay attention to what's going on in this broad world of beer, and that's these critics lists. So we've tapped into the judges that I mentioned earlier to write about their top 10, as well as top trends and some other questions that we post to them. All of those are in the Best in Beer issue now. Of course, you're a subscriber, and so you've probably read them. But the point of this episode of the podcast is to kind of dive in and add some color around that, and also just to have an excuse to talk to some smart folks and get them on the podcast every year. Because I look forward to that too. Nonetheless, these we try to tap into folks that are from all over the country, all the corners of the world. And of course, Joe's in Bangkok, Thailand, and brings his own special perspective to that. This the focus of this episode. Throughout the course of it, I'll check in with each one of them. We'll talk through their favorite beers, trends, and more to help build a big round picture of what's great in beer today. Stan, I think we'll wait a minute to talk about your list. We'll instead kick things off with Kate Bernot. But before we do that, for years, G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across the country. They're proud of the cool partnerships they've built over the past 30 years. They know brewing doesn't stop at 5 o'clock, and nor do they. G&D uses quality components, expert craftsmanship, and constant innovation. With 24/7 service and support, your brewery will never stop. Remote monitor your chiller for simple and fast access to all the information you need, providing you with the peace of mind your operation is running smoothly. Reach out for a quote today at gdchillers.com or call to discuss your next project. Also, this episode is sponsored by BSG and their partners HVG, who bring you the very best in German hops, including Amira, the latest from their hop breeding program. With its classic hoppy, slightly herbal, and zesty lemon aromas, it's the ideal hop for those looking to capture the traditional flavor of a classic German lager. Visit bsgcraftbrewing.com to learn more. And if you hear Old Orchard mentioned in the brewing community, don't be surprised. The flavored craft juice concentrate blends from Old Orchard have shipped to over 46 states. Their new brewing customers often mention discovering Old Orchard through the word-of-mouth recommendation of another brewer. To join the core of Old Orchard's brewing community, learn more at oldorchard.com/brewer. Now, here's my conversation with Kate. First up in our critics list, joining us to share her best 10 beers of the year, as well as some memorable experiences and trends. Kate Bernot, contributing editor for Craft Beer and Brewing. Welcome back to the podcast, Kate.
Thank you. This is one of my favorite things we do all year, so I really look forward to it. Thanks for having me back.
We've had a lot of Kate experience, last month, I guess, was it last month? Yeah. Well, I guess it was about 6 weeks ago. You came out to the Craft Beer and Brewing office for a couple of days of best in beer judging alongside Stan Hieronymus, Joe, me, and then our special guest judge, Patrick Dawson, on Tuesday. And then I just saw you a couple of days ago at the Festival of Barrel-Aged Beers, FOBAB, in Chicago. How was your FOBAB?
FOBAB was excellent. I realized my first FOBAB I ever went to was in 2012 when I was still living in Chicago, and it was in the Plumbers Union Hall, and brewers just kind of had like cardboard signs that said like chili stout. And it was like very DIY and very small and niche and nerdy, and to see it become so popular and so kind of reaching mainstream drinkers, and to see all these out-of-state breweries now, it was really amazing how much it's grown in a decade.
That was a fun time. That was my first time at FOBAB for the last 10 years of craft beer brewing. I was like, this is going to be the year I go. And then it never was. And this year I finally lined up enough podcasts to make me make the trip. And so actually all podcasts, almost all with lager brewers, strangely enough.
Love that.
Which listeners to the podcast have already heard one, and we've got a few more coming down the pipeline. Won't ruin that surprise for anybody. But it was fun to see it. So much passion and love for barrel-aged beers, everything. I mean, some of my favorite beers were small 5% pale barrel-aged beers, and not necessarily giant high-gravity behemoths, but fun to dive into that entire spectrum.
Yeah, 100%. When I talked to attendees, most people were... obviously, it's very memorable, these big, did you have the one with banana? Did you have the one with macadamia nuts? But then the longest line I stood in was in the lager lounge. So do with that what you will.
It's brewers, isn't it? It's
Yep.
always the brewers clogging up the line in the lager lounge. Anyway, let's dive into your top 10, your favorite beers of this past year. What is first on your list?
First on my list was a beer I had when traveling to San Carlos de Bariloche in Argentina, and the Wesley American Pale Ale. I had it at the brewery, and I was in love with it. And I thought, well, you're just in a beautiful place, and you went for a hike, so you're just loving this beer. No, I went back multiple times to make sure this beer was as good as I had initially thought, and it sure was. Very sweet fruit aromas and flavors, but not overly sweet on the palate. Just a really beautiful expression of like honeysuckle and apricot and floral citrus, but with just the right kind of Wonder Bready malt underneath it. I thought, dang, any brewery in America would be super proud to brew this beer, and I drank a lot of it while I was there.
That's amazing. Joe and I ran into a number of American pale ales on menus in the Czech Republic, of all places.
There you go.
Kind of wild to see this American style, take off. But I think it hits a narrative which I absolutely love, which is, inspiration in beer moves in all directions today.
Absolutely.
For the first 20, 30 years of craft beer, it was moving from Northern Europe to America. And now the direction is moving in every direction, from America to America, from Asia, to America, from Asia to Europe, in the way of, Japanese blends of lamp. I mean, there's just watching this move in so many different directions, South America to North America, South America to Europe, this kind of truly international approach and watching this inspiration in these styles, crisscross oceans and continents. It's truly an awesome, amazing thing.
Yeah, I couldn't believe how great some of the beers were that I had at literally the end of the world in South America.
That's amazing. So what's next on your list?
Next on my list is a beer from Keeping Together called A Mutual Surrender. And I know you do too. We love the beers that Avery is making.
Everyone will hear this after our Best in Beer issue drops. And so they know that Avery has also made our Best in Beer, Best 20 Beers of 2023.
Correct. Yeah. So, not shocking that she finds her way onto my list as well. But she calls this beer a Saison Rosé. And to me, it was like a sort of a spritzer effect. It was very fizzy and jammy, plum notes from these second use Cab Franc and Merlot grapes from Walla Walla. But the tannic presence was really reduced, I think, because of that second use. So just this very effervescent, light, kind of electric, insanely refreshing, yet still quite complex beer. And, all of Avery's beers are really inspired by memories and places, and whatever place this came from, like, I want to go there immediately and just live in it forever. So highly memorable.
Next on your list is an IPA.
Yes. And an IPA that I bought at a Trader Joe's in Spokane, Washington. What a time to be alive.
Off of a warm shelf at Trader Joe's?
Off of a warm shelf at Trader Joe's. My God.
I love Trader Joe's, but I hate that about Trader Joe's. They don't, they could do a better job with how they treat beer.
Absolutely. And yet this still tasted so good. So this is the Bale Breaker Friends IPA, which is a collaboration with Sierra Nevada. And it is a combination of New Zealand and American hops. And sometimes I find New Zealand hops, especially if the brewery is like really calling them out, like sometimes it's just a bit much and a little bit, I don't know, kind of one note unless you're blending it really well. And here, incredible, like lemongrass, candied orange, all the, of course, like Sauvignon Blanc notes that you would expect. But then there was like even fruit smoothie flavors at the end that were so real fruit-like. This beer totally blew me away. I bought it like off a warm shelf for, I think, just like a camping trip or something. And I was like, holy crap, is this one of the best beers I've had this year? So again, good beer abounds and sometimes finds you in the strangest places.
What a communal way for a brewery like Bale Breaker that's in the middle of their own family's hop farm to tap into New Zealand hops of all things for this. But there's a lot of global hop love here. Next on your list, you go to the Lager Realm.
Lager Realm, yes. And a beer that really stood out to me from Craft Brewers Conference, which if after 4 days of pretty heavy beer sampling, something stands out, I know it's really special. This was Rhythm's Unfiltered Lager, Rhythm Brewing out of New Haven, Connecticut. I took this home from an NB2A event, the National Black Brewers Association event, and drank it the next day at my hotel. And I loved that this lager was a touch sweet, but with like the carbonation cleaned it up super well. I think we forget that sweetness is a really pleasant thing. And it sometimes gets like a little shade because it's like, oh, we should like everything bone dry because it's more sophisticated. I'm not saying this is like a sweet beer, but just on that side of it. And it was like such a nice, easy to drink thing with just, again, the right carbonation to kind of counter that. And I really loved it. It tasted like Cheerios in a really comforting way to me. And I really was glad that I threw this beer in my purse for the next day.
That idea of lager being able to embrace sweetness in measured ways where appropriate is a theme that I think we're coming back to over and over again over the last 2 months the next and past 2 months of the podcast. And so you're right on theme there. I totally agree with you. Let's not forget that malt is delicious and, can make fantastic lagers. What's next on your list? This was one that we tasted in our best in beer tasting that found its way onto your personal list through that. Another reason brewers should also continue to send beer for our kind of wild card tasting for best in beer.
Wild card is a very good word, I think, for this beer because I loved it and was obsessed with it. And I think it was a little polarizing for certain other judges. Everyone liked it, but it was, I don't know, something about it really spoke to me. I can honestly say, so the beer that we're talking about, Seventh Son Pineapple Express, the beer has to explicitly state that there's no THC in it because you would believe it does. This is using cannabis terpenes that are they're there, but using it in a tart fruit beer. I have never had a beer like this before. You get kind of pineapple core earthiness, and the terpenes are very green and sort of the earth and minty. And then there's like the zingy acidity. I was just blown away by how the terpenes were integrated here. And I thought it was such a cool, like, brewers finding a new color in their palette and like painting with it in a style that is different than anything I'd ever had. And I just thought it was super cool.
I agree with you. This was definitely in some of our conversations about best beers of the year. Ultimately didn't make the overall list, but like, why let IPAs have all the terpene fun, right? You know, I mean,
totally.
Terpenes, right. Like, this is a flavor, and ability to add this into other beer styles that can also resonate with folks. Such a cool way to think about it. Nice.
Absolutely.
It's a good creative idea, then also a fantastic exection.
Absolutely.
Both those things together. Next, you went sweet on the pastry stout side.
Yes. I wouldn't say pastry stouts are, a style that I maybe even expected to have on my list here, but this one super blew me away. Perennial Colorant. There's a phase 3 collab. What I really loved here, and there's a ton going on. This is like a massive over-the-top imperial stout with coconut, 2 kinds of vanillas, aged 17 months in Old Fitzgerald wheated bourbon barrels, like so much happening. But my favorite part of this beer was the cinnamon. The cinnamon sort of coconut vanilla interplay was so excellent and had so many culinary memories. Like, my brain was just lighting up like a pinball machine. I was like, oh, it's kind of like Cinnamon Toast Crunch. And it's also kind of like these cookies that I used to eat. But then there's enough of this like chocolate, whiskey, dark cherry thing happening to keep it from going totally confectionery. Obviously still quite sweet and giant, but I thought for a beer with everything going on, it was exceedingly well done. And the cinnamon was so fantastic. More cinnamon in these beers, please.
Well, and I think you're right. I think the quality of their ingredient sourcing, plays into this too. And then watching how brewers have gone deeper into that world of vanilla and that world of cinnamon, and finding the exact sources for these things that are going to make delicious beers. Such a cool thing to watch. I think we probably need to work on more content around that, especially with our upcoming stout issue. Now that I think about it. Okay, next on your list, a collaboration of sorts.
Yes, Jester King Fantôme del Rey. So this was a collaboration years ago, and then I guess Jester King just sort of rebrewed that beer. So not actually with Fantôme present here, but based on the collaboration that they did. As one would expect from a collaboration between these two breweries, it is weird as all get out. Probably the weirdest beer on here to me. Like, so savory and kind of mushroomy and umami and also funky and a little bit acidic. And there's a ton of oak in there. And it's like, I can see this being so wrong. And instead it was so right. And just this wonderful, like, kind of, this is a beer you got to like sit with and really take a minute and think about, and kind of like an intellectual exercise in where those flavors are coming from and how they're playing with each other. And I just thought it was so weird and delicious and really provocative, I guess. I kind of had to sit alone with this beer.
And a good moment to reflect on everyone's experience with Fantôme as Danny figures out what the next steps are for that brewery.
Yes.
But what a pivotally important brewery in the world of farmhouse brewing and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Next on your list was one that John Hickenlooper, former governor of Colorado, was talking about at the opening of the Great American Beer Festival Awards ceremony.
Yeah, it won a silver medal in the coffee beer category this year. Wynkoop's Kurt's Mile High Malt. I drank this at Wynkoop and was talking to the head brewer there, Todd, who was like, "Oh, I'm just really digging this batch. Like, I sent this to GABF. I just really feel good about it." So when the brewer is like really in a groove about it, I'm like, I should probably try that beer, I guess. And it's a Vienna lager with Ethiopian coffee, and like just the Vienna lager part is so smart. Adding this like nuttiness that's also riffing off like a lot of the dried fruit that's in the coffee beans themselves. I thought this was an exceptional beer, and then I felt extremely validated when it won the medal. I guess probably Todd did too. But just an example of like when a brewer is like really feeling a certain beer, like of course you got to try it because it might be one of your 10 best of the year.
I love seeing that, and I have brewers mention that to me. It's like, well, you all rated it this, and then it won a gold medal at JBF. Like, boom, there we go.
Yep.
Nice to see some of those commonalities, and those things tend to happen
Yep.
more than we planned for sure. Another IPA is next on your list, or I should say a double IPA, or a double dry hopped double IPA.
DDH everything. Yes.
So many Ds.
So many Ds. Russian River double dry hopped Pliny the Elder. I was like, is it too obvious to put this on here? I don't know. This beer is fantastic. What did I expect? I'd never had double dry hopped version. Drank it alongside standard Pliny. I don't know that you could ever try to like choose between these. It's like two different experiences of the same beer, but I really loved how much of the like mimosa, very citrus, creamsicle, tangerine situation the dry hopping was bringing to this. And again, just to experience a beer that you love and respect so deeply in kind of a new light, it's like, I don't know, it's just a fantastic experience, and really proof that obviously Russian River can do whatever the heck they want and knock it out of the park. So I shouldn't have been surprised by this experience, but it was cool to like, I don't know, it's like seeing a movie you love in like 35 millimeter, or in IMAX. I don't know, just like a different version of a thing you love. So it was just a very cool, the whole thing was a cool experience for me to taste both of those side by side.
I love how Russian River uses those beers, because I think this one initially had come out of their Pliny for President kind of thing, and I know that it got tweaked since then because Vinny can't help but tweak all of these things.
Absolutely.
I'm curious. I think I'm blanking on the conversation now, but it's got another plan next year for next year's Pliny for President. Can't wait to see what that one becomes, and then if it finds its way into the lineup in the future. But yeah, like next year's an election year. That means Pliny for President. It's the best thing about any election year.
We need it. We need beer during election years.
Exactly. So one last beer on your list.
Yes. Time and Materials Boulevard of Imperial Creams. Time and Materials is a very teeny brewery in Reading, Massachusetts. And this beer was a collaboration with Lost Shoe Brewery and Coffee Roastery. I loved this beer for the rum barrel aging with a lighter coffee base, cream ale. And just the way the rum barrel is interacting with the Guatemalan cold brew, and there's like that little corny sweetness. There was also vanilla and lactose. Again, tons going on here, but when you can really distinctly pick out the influence of all of them and they meld together perfectly, I thought it was expertly melded, very harmonious, and for put kind of a very small brewery on my radar, and it was just really cool to find such a little teeny tiny brewery doing something that really kind of blew me away. And also I'm a sucker for rum barrel aging. So
very cool. What was your most memorable beer drinking experience of the year? This one goes back to Chile again.
Yeah. So this was the same Argentina, South American trip I was on earlier this year, but in the town of San Pedro de Atacama, Chile, which is in the middle of the Atacama Desert, where I was doing some camping. That town is wild because there's people from all over the world coming to this like dusty desert town where the streets are just like sand. And obviously, given that heat and you're also at a very high elevation, you want to drink some really cold beer. Found this soccer bar that I'm probably going to mispronounce, Chela Cabor, and sat drinking some very, very cold Kunsten lager, and like the people watching was insane. It's like the pub in Star Wars where there's like people speaking a million languages and there's like kind of some nefarious folks in the corner, who knows? But like also really friendly people giving advice to each other about where to camp and where do I get fuel for my jet stove and jet boil stove, and where can I find a fishing line? I don't know. It really reminded me that like pubs are the public house. They are the gathering place for, especially in a new town. Like you can really go and try to get your problem solved at the local pub. So that was just one of the most unique bars I've ever been to in my whole life, and in a cool place.
Problem solved, new problems created. It all kind of happens, right there.
The cause of and solution to all of life's problems. Exactly.
So a beer topic that fascinated you this year.
Yes. Well, maybe it was because I wrote about it a ton for Craft Beer and Brewing and for the Brewing Industry Guide, but thiols. Wow. I have not watched sort of a real-time discussion between science and brewing technique and drinkers evolve so quickly, sort of in real time. I mean, just over the course of months, researchers in yeast and malts as well, and hops, are speaking with brewers, getting their real on the ground perspective of what thiol boosting products and yeasts are doing for them. And then drinkers are giving their feedback about, are we liking where this is going? And then all three of those kind of ping-ponging back and forth to figure out what is the direction we really want this, tool kind of to go in. It was just, I felt like I was watching, discovery happen in real time. And I think the future for how thiols are used or highlighted is obviously like being written right now. So that was just something I could have written about probably every month.
That's absolutely true. And it's interesting to watch whether it's, research coming out of, Berkeley, on the West Coast, whether it's research coming out of Omega Yeast in Chicago. We're watching some of these conversations really moving forward. I think that when we look back at this year and last year, things like discovery of the, gene that leads to haziness in beer.
Absolutely.
When we look back at this time, it'll become more apparent in retrospect, which is obviously why we do this. We have these conversations now, because we're starting to think about what will this look like in the future. But I think when we look back at this period of development and of research and of scientific progress in the world of brewing, I mean, it's really very significant, and we shouldn't, underplay how impactful some of this science is in making and building the foundation for beautiful beers that we will continue to drink in the future.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's finish this off with your most encouraging thing happening in craft beer lately.
Yes, I chose the unhyping of craft beer. This year, it really seemed to me, and I say this as a positive thing, because it seems to me this year that craft beer is achieving its early vision from decades ago. Like, drinkers can find incredibly well-made, flavorful beer of all different types all over the world, from gas stations, airports, convenience stores, hair salons. This was the point, right? And while I think, the sort of de-hyping or mainstreaming of craft has other, sort of deeper implications for like homogeny and commoditization, and there's some kind of like philosophical questions there, and how special are these things anymore? I think just on a sort of like practical level, accessibility and drinker access to delicious beer, like, truly what a time to be alive. This is what pioneers of this industry had hoped for, and we get to live it. As evidenced by one of my top 10 beers of the year coming from a warm shelf at Trader Joe's. So I think it's a positive for drinkers at the very least.
Great, flavorful beer as ever. And I think you're right. What we don't want to become the thing that craft beer, defined itself against for so long. You don't want to watch, compacting margins and consolidation and large players, pushing small players out of the market. This diversity in craft beer is its strength, and having this range of size and scales of craft beer, and having ranges of price points that can support different types of production and the different types of artistry and craftsmanship. Those are all important things. But the idea that there's a general consciousness and focus on flavor in beer, like just that sheer concept now, we take it for granted, right?
Absolutely.
And
here we are. So gotta enjoy the certainly the positive aspects of that, because there's more delicious beer than at any time in modern history here. So I feel good about being on the record as that being a good thing.
100%. Well, Kate, thanks for joining me for this segment. If you want to read all of Kate's writing for Craft Beer, both Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine and our Brewing Industry Guide, she pens twice a month stories for our All Access program through the Brewing Industry Guide. And if you are a member of the industry, go out there and get that All Access subscription that includes the Brewing Industry Guide, so you can read hers and Don Tess and Stan Hieronymus and our consistent contributors to the Brewing Industry Guide All Access program. Kate also writes features for craft beer and brewing, also writes case studies for the Brewing Industry Guide magazine. It's all places to read Kate's fantastic coverage of the beer industry. Thanks, Kate. It's awesome talking to you. Thanks. Looking forward to doing this again next year, but I'll see you before then.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Jamie.
Next up, Stan and I will discuss his critics list, but first, ProBrew is excited to announce that they are currently featuring short lead times between 2 and 4 weeks for their in-stock Pro-Fill rotary can fillers. These can fillers run at speeds between 100 and 600 plus cans per minute, while achieving precise and consistent filling volumes not achievable by most inline and mobile fillers. For more information, fill out their contact form on www.probrew.com or email contactus@probrew.com to learn exactly how they can take your operations to the next level. ProBrew, brew your beer. Also, you like wildly aromatic IPAs and tropical lagers? Good thing Omega designed thiolized yeast for just that reason. Thiolized yeast are a new tool for brewers to bring intense guava and passion fruit aromas out of your malts and hops. And wait, there's more. Omega yeast makes yeast to order with a consistent 1-week lead time, ensuring peak freshness and reliability. And join the craft beer community in Sacramento, March 12th through 14th for the California Craft Beer Summit. Bring your entire team from production to marketing to hospitality. There's something for everyone. The summit is a can't-miss event, offering 2 days of educational sessions, a huge interactive expo floor, beer and food tastings, and networking with industry leaders. Take advantage of the lowest price to attend. Early bird registration on sale now through December 22nd at cacraftbeersummit.com. Okay, Stan, now it's your turn. What's first on your list of favorite beers this year?
I think people understand this list is really a fiscal year. We start at the previous GBF, we go to the next GBF. But it turns out that every beer on this list is from 2023. I had in January a beer that's known as Fifth Hammer 5x5, and there are a lot of fives in this. Fifth Hammer obviously has one. They partnered with Fifth Frame, another brewery. Both were having their 5th anniversary. They created a farmhouse beer. Then Fifth Hammer took that beer, put it in a Sauvignon Blanc barrel along with the mixed fermentation. And so that's basically what this beer is. However, they then primed it with local honey. And that honey really comes through. It's an incredibly salad of fruits, and it's just a lovely, relatively low alcohol for this sort of style beer, and wonderful to drink.
I love Fifth Hammer. Had a great, actually it was like a Citra Pale Ale on the cask engine that a couple of years ago that just absolutely loved. I guess it was last fall. Anyway, what's next on your list?
Garage Project 4 Legs Good, which is a 2.5% beer. And Garage Project is, they had a beer, Chance Luck Magic, which is also a mixed fermentation beer that I think won Best of Show in Australia, Best of Show in New Zealand, and medaled at the World Beer Cup. It's a wonderful beer and striking. This is like a junior version of it, and it's only 2.5% alcohol, and it also has a spectacular name for a low alcohol beer.
Fantastic. I'm a huge fan of mixed fermentation table beers and low ABV levels.
Well, people stand in line at the Firestone Festival to drink the pickle beer. And I talked to somebody who was there this year and said, I had to ask for some of those other beers. And those are sensational beers that they're making. Their investment in lab work is way above average.
If anyone is pioneering molecular gastronomy in beer, it's definitely Garage Project.
Yeah.
Well, your next beer goes in a completely different direction.
So Urban Chestnut Stammtisch, and just looking at this list, and I hadn't realized it until now, 9 of the 10 beers I had at the brewery, and then frequently bought beer and brought it back home. Urban Chestnut Stammtisch, for the first time since they opened in 2011, I was not at that brewery. We used to live in St. Louis. That made it easier. But even during COVID years, we happened to be there sometime or another. But in this case, passing through the St. Louis airport, which I do know where to stop. And actually, when I'm landing, I check the gate I landed in and then the gate I'm going to fly out of and go, oh, good, Urban Chestnut's stand is between those two. And when I've got, say, 20 minutes, and this happened twice this last year, I know I can pick up the beer, stand in the next line because we're flying Southwest, and by the time I board, then I'm done with the beer. And by the time we're at 10,000 feet, a little bit of the bitterness is starting to go away. This is a very properly bitter Pilsner. And as regular readers of craft beer and brewing know, that's important to Joe Stange. And as I said in my comments here, the only thing missing was Joe along while I drank the stomp.
Beautiful, beautiful. What's next on your list?
So the Benedictine Brewery, which is in Mount Angel, Oregon, it's their Pinot Barrel Aged Dark Night. And so this is their base Dark Night beer. Like 6-7 years ago, they put just in a single Pinot barrel at another brewery where it was aging, and they kind of forgot it was there. When the brewery went out of business, they returned the barrel. At that point, they did not have a barrel program. And they tasted this beer and they said, we need to do more barrels in beer. And it is, it's got it's a Belgian strong dark. So it's got lots of dark fruit, which you're going to get when you age a beer for 6 years over time, if it's a good base beer going in. And then that just blends with, because also it's got to get maybe 2 or 3% alcohol out of the grapes in there with that. So it was a fresh barrel. It was just, it all comes together, and it could have been a disaster.
Interesting. Next up, a beer a little closer to your current home in Colorado.
Yeah, the Primitive Meadville, which is a collaboration with Voodoo Brewing, which seems to be in Pennsylvania, and a
Seems to be.
No, I mean it
seems to be franchising across the country.
Well, that's how
right
I was
going to
be.
Weird kind of way.
So they're franchising, and Primitive is specifically from that place. And as Brandon says, it's crazy that they've come together to be such good friends, but they are. And so that this was a collab between the two, but it tastes totally of having beer at Primitive, which will be interesting to see because Primitive is actually going to move inside of another brewery. And I hope it works out because that brewery is less than 7 miles from my house.
Well, it wasn't like Long Island was that far from you, but now it'll be even closer.
We were 40 or 45 minutes from there. But it's also, and I don't know that it'll be the same way. It was also one of the best curated tap selections in the United States, I think, for somebody who has 6 or 7, just a cross section where you can get a cask beer, you can get a properly poured Czech beer, you can get a hazy IPA, and then you can get this fabulous selection of spontaneous beers.
I hope they crank up some of those cask engines in the New Image tap room where they are going to be, co-locating, coexisting in the future. Because you're right, such a cool place. Anyway, we'll see how that all goes. But of course, they're in good company with New Image moving forward. New Image, one of our beers of the year, editors' picks for beers of the year this year too. So stacking good on top of good. What's next on your list?
The rather long name to fit on a label, which is the Wheatland Spring Return. And that's actually what appears in the big words, but it's the Estate Piedmont Pilsner. And it's a different sort of farmhouse brewery. It's on a farm. They do make some beers, a mixed fermentation beer with yeast they've collected. But the farm aspect that's super important is they are growing their own grain, and you can stand on the brew deck and see the fields that's coming from, and it really expresses the land that they're on. They're also involved in a project to breed varieties more suited to the Virginia environment, so more of their breweries can make those sort of beers. And I certainly hope what they call land beer. And you can go to Germany and people will say this is a land beer. In the United States, nobody's quite sure what it means. But I hope that's part of the future of American beer.
Absolutely. It's fun. It's been awesome to watch and track some of those, like Riggs in Illinois, following that same kind of growing their own grain, having their grain malted and then brewing with it right there, adding value to their own agriculture and, expressing not just terroir in this loose, kind of amorphous sense of what terroir is, but actually employing their own agricultural products in the production of the beer that they make.
Yeah, the people, and it's a ways to get out there. That it's about 20 minutes north of the Dulles Airport, but people from DC travel there, and they have got to know this. This is, when I taste this, I know that it comes from this place.
Yeah, there's a great story out of a craft beer brewing, or maybe it was our brewing industry guide. I'm a little blanking on it now. Anyway, if you're a subscriber, go check it out. Next up, Ohio.
Yeah, Narrow Path Brewing, and this they're on a bicycle trail. And again, this is what Chad Powers, the brewer, saying to me. This particular beer he considers an offering from the land, as much an offering from the land as it is from the brewer. So it's a combination where he's getting the malt for this, which is smoked, and it's in a Norwegian smoking style from Sugar Creek in Indiana. Then he was using, he goes over into Kentucky because he has a friend and they can do this with. He could get him closer in, but he actually harvests cedar branches that he uses in this beer. And then it's fermented with a rehydrated Fike yeast, which a home brewer had not collected, had gathered from somebody in Norway, obviously, and brought back, and they rehydrated. And you put that together. This is a smokier batch of malt and can be off-putting to some people, but that cedar, and if you like smoke, which I do, it really comes together, and it's a really powerful punch. And it's also worth noting it's done by a brewer who has an idea what they're doing, won a medal on just from the brewery this year, and also won another medal in a collab this year. So pretty good at what they do.
These last two have certainly been beers we would expect from the guy who wrote Brewing Local, the book. No surprise there. The next one, maybe a little bit of a different take, but this next beer is actually one that was on both of our personal critics lists.
Yeah, the cohesion, and I think you know better than me how to say this.
Zwa.
That's we can tell which of us has been to the Czech Republic more recently.
I also actually studied the Russian language in high school for several years, and actually a little bit in college, and so some of the similar baseline pronunciation. But Zwa is too,
This was their anniversary beer, and so it's a twist on their flagship, but it comes across in a variety of different ways. Just a little bit different malt bill, which is, I don't know if you talked about your list yet or not.
My list does not end up on the podcast. You'll have to go read the magazine.
Well, I can't even talk about why you like the difference, but it is.
You absolutely can. I was going to mention it too, and I'll tell you what.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah. When I came after coming back from the Czech Republic, actually, I think I joked about this a little bit with Joe, but I mean, I became that kind of insufferable jerk. But even with Eric, and let me just apologize to Eric Larkin, the co-founder of Cohesion, for this. But I would, even at CBC this year, at the Czech beer event they did a Monday night, I was like, just being a kind of obnoxious, about it. And it's like, Eric just threw in the little trolling comments like, well, your beers, they're good. They just need to be sweeter. Because no one ever tells a lager brewer that their lager should be sweeter. But they should. They should. I mean, that's the nice thing about Czech Pale Lager. Yeah. Like, it has to have that fullness. It's got to have that body to stand up to that kind of heavy hop load. And so I would, every time I'd see him, I just kept repeating, they got to be sweeter. They've got to be sweeter. And of course we argued about it. And he's like, no, we're making Czech style lagers for our audience and our palate. Yeah. And this is what, people want, and they don't, and totally fine. Then we went down for that issue. Joe wrote a story on brewing Czech style. So I reached out to texted Eric, like, hey, can I swing down there and take some photos of pours? And, just because that would be the best place to get good, proper Czech style pours for a photo. So drove down, shot these photos. Brooke, their taproom manager, I was talking with her as we're setting these things up. And, I made some slight comment, about challenging Eric about, sweetness in his beers. And she looks at me like, oh, you're that guy. Oh, you're the guy. You're the guy. I'm like, oh man, now I have a reputation within Cohesion for being that guy. Anyway, I felt like they brewed this beer just to shut me up. Maybe I could be wrong. I'm sure there's other motivations there, but that's what it felt like. So,
well, it's nice because it's with Troubadour, which is a Colorado malt. I'd say local, but it's not that close. But it's still
local to me, Fort Collins, right?
Yeah, it's a Troubadour malt, so it keeps some of that same character. Again, we talk about beer from the land. Eric is devoted to making Czech style and doing it with ingredients that are going to give you that flavor and finding it. So far, he's not found hops grown locally. So that's important. And he's really interested in the German hop breeding program. So this has up front, the Czech hop breeding program has hops up front that are at such small amounts that he had to officially, I think this is a collab with a brewery in the Czech Republic so they could get these hops. So it's a little spicier and obviously, as Jamie pointed out, a little bit sweeter. And on a hot sunny afternoon sitting outside, it really is super refreshing. I had a 10 after this, going to lower alcohol, and then came back to this one, and it was still, you didn't go, ooh, this is heavier and bigger boost and stuff like that. It's just super refreshing beer.
When we say big about it, like this is a 4.5% beer.
Yeah, exactly.
So, right. Yeah, all things in measure, but man, what an amazingly flavorful 4.5% beer, and one that I can drink in quantity, and one that I kept going back because they had it on tap in Fort Collins at the one account they have in Fort Collins at Tap and Handle. And so, I drank a fair amount of it there and would go to the bar just to drink a little bit more of it. Not something I typically do, but here we are. You're right. Next on your list.
Well, it's interesting you point that because it's like Casey Grisette, but this is wet hop with Cascade hops from Colorado. I have 4 mixed fermentation. beers on the list. Maybe I should be embarrassed as the hop guy, but that's the way it goes. I love the Casey house character from their yeast. The Grisette just supports that wonderfully. This had aged in barrels, and so to do the fresh hop, in this case, the best I can understand is they kind of poured it over the fresh Cascade hops, and that's already a beer that has all kinds of hard-to-describe citrus flavors, and now we add in what they are getting from the Cascade hop. So, when I sent this in, Joe sent me a list. He said, I need to challenge you to say more about the citrus other than lots of citrus impossible to describe. So what I wrote is this has the guava pulp meets tart lime rind you find in some Brazilian fruits, which is unfair because you got to go to Brazil, I realize, but it's the sort of thing. We've had some Catarina sours here the last couple of days, and it's a reminder when you go someplace, they're going to have a fruit you've never had before, and you'll go, yeah, I can tell that's fruit, and then how do I describe this? So anyway, that's what it is, an intensely really cool citrus experience.
Were those hops, those Cascades from the Billy Goat Hop Farm?
Yes, from Billy Goat.
Who won the Cascade Cup this
Yes, this last year.
First time a Colorado hop farm.
The first time a hop farm other than Oregon and Washington had won the Cascade Cup.
Crazy times. What's this world coming to? But no, what a cool way to connect locally. So one more beer on your list.
Okay, finally an IPA from Cloudburst in Seattle, and wonderfully named Actual Poison. Pretty typical for Cloudburst, sitting in the tap room, and my wife Dari, I don't think, had really looked at their Instagram feed to see how they describe their beers, and about 3 beers in, she's like on the floor laughing like crazy. So you'd read this. I don't know that it would entice you to drink the beer. It just might scare you away. But again, on a Saturday afternoon, a day before my birthday, as a matter of fact, sitting in that tap room and watching people come in and out, it's just a great vibe, that experience that you like a lot. And of course, I was my favorite drinking partner. In this case, it has a lot of those modern flavors. When people talk about a West Coast IPA, they are fruitier than they were 15 years ago. And so it has the Citra Mosaic Equinox, but it also has a good chunk of Chinook that gives you that really, the best I can say is edge. I know that's not the description necessarily, but a different sort of bitterness and a different sort of finish. And that got me thinking about how long Chinook has been around. And Chinook was bred in 1985, which turns out to be the same year that the movie Back to the Future came out. And that's sort of what I feel what the best West Coast beers are doing, is they're taking us back and to the future at the same time.
I love Cloudburst. Obviously, they've been our beers of the year in the past, and they sent us a beer this year. It was a double red ale, which, of course, for me, echoes back to like Avery Hog Heaven.
Yeah.
But the name was, I felt seen in this name. It was Say Hi to Your Dad for Me.
Yeah.
I like, yeah.
That was also on tap.
We were getting so old that we're cool again, Stan.
I've gone through that stage twice.
Perfect. Okay. Well, you have 5 more questions on your list, but instead of answering those, go Craft Beer Brewing Magazine, read those. Let's talk about your biggest takeaways here from the Copa Baja and Mexicali. We spent the whole day judging yesterday, like we mentioned before. And you wanted to talk about 1 or 2 beers that we tasted, because it's like they know you. And I mean, I love that I got to do this too. Wood and smoked and historical beers. So the first beer on our table yesterday was a Grodziska. It's like you get typecast into this. You be careful what you wish for, but it was great. I mean, it could have been carved a little more, but it was otherwise really great.
Well, first of all, to back up one thing, there's a good chance your biggest takeaway from this weekend is still coming ahead when, first of all, this afternoon, we're going to go eat Chinese Mexican food, which is on Saturday last year was just incredible. And then we're going to go to a festival that is so festive. And there's just a joy. And this, as it seems to me, as soon as you get south of the United States, again, it's a little bit like going back in time, because there's this excitement about beer and people want to learn about it. They want to make it better, and we'll have beers with fruits that are unique to this region, and you'll taste this and go, I've never tasted anything like this before. And you've got the next few hours to look forward to.
You were 100% right about this, Dan. Let me just set the stage for you. Last night after the awards ceremony, brewers with medals around their necks, and we all went over to Amante, the brewery, and back in the brew house, they had guys set up serving al pastor tacos, just incredible tacos back in the brew house. But then they had, musicians sitting in front of the brew deck, like playing music. The crowd of brewers, the crowd of, volunteers are all standing around a circle, singing along. I mean, it was riotous. It was fun. It was such a beautiful energy. And it was a nice reminder of what the culture of craft beer is and can be. Men, women, folks from the United States, folks from all over Mexico, all singing, eating, celebrating craft beer together. I mean, it kind of sums it up. You're right. It feels like things felt when it was, tight and we were all in this together, years ago. And it's good not to lose sight of that. I mean, craft beer means something, right?
Right. Exactly. It's so much fun, and it makes the beers better. It's not just a halo around it. We're judging these beers blind, and I had, I think, 3 beers in the course of the competitions that I scored over 40 at, and that's BJCP scoring standard. So basically, we had beers that would be pushing or hitting 100 in the magazine.
Yeah. I know. I mean, it was nice to see, and the tops of most of these categories were really world-class beers.
Yep. And I'm pretty excited because after breakfast, for some reason, I was headed up the elevator, and Alfredo, forgetting his last name, who won, I think, 6 medals yesterday, and we were having breakfast, and all of a sudden he comes running to the elevator holding out 2 cans of beer that somebody had left at the table because I had judged a category, and then they'd found this beer in the category and thought I might want to have the beers again. So it's kind of crazy, and it's fun down here.
Absolutely. So what were your biggest beer takeaways then? The beer that we gave the gold in our category.
As I said, we're on a fiscal year, so I'm collecting thoughts for possibilities for next year's list, and probably that's the Higgs-Boson beer that we had, so we started with the Grodziski, and we gave it a very high score. It is not quite as hoppy as Live Oak's, and it doesn't have the advantage of the particular malted wheat that Live Oak has, but it was on a standard better than all, but I can only think of one Grodziski in Poland that it would be better. It just had a lot of balance, finesse. It was a wonderful beer, and we're going through and we're thinking this could be the gold. Then we got to beer like 3 or 4, and we had this beer, and when you read this ingredient list and you think they're going to make an oud brun, and they're going to age it in bourbon barrels for 2.5 years, and then they're going to age it in the bottle for another half year, there is so much room for error in there that you would think might not be a good idea. But as soon as it was poured and you smell it, my first thought was, obscenity, Grodziski's not going to get first place.
That was from Madueño Brewery in Tijuana.
Yeah, Higgs-Boson, I think we said that. And,
right.
And I got to figure out a way, because I'm not putting beers on my list on the basis of drinking 2 or 3 ounces. I don't want to belittle anybody who does those things on various things, but I don't. But it was just so balanced, such an immense combination of flavors. It expressed the barrel itself as much as the bourbon. So what the barrel brings to it in texture and a little bit of vanilla and depth and things like that. And all of that time spent, to which I'll say, so we're not going to talk about my 5 questions, but one question is, what's the most underrated ingredient in the beer? And then the other part of the question was, you were supposed to then name a brewery that is an example of that. And mine is time, and the amount of time you're willing to put let that beer mature and things like that. And my example of brewery is Bierstadt Lager, which is in Denver. So it's a beer I can drink all the time. And I said, when we had this beer to Jamie, I said, I could have replaced Bierstadt Lager with this beer, but I'm not going to because Bierstadt Lager does it all.
Well, there you go. Stan, thanks for sharing your list. Looking forward to building some more memories over the next the rest of the time that we have here in Mexico. And again, thank you to the folks here at Copa Baja and Mexicali for bringing us both down here and giving us a great location to record this little piece of our annual reconnection on Critic's List. Courtney Iseman is up next, but first, who doesn't love free samples? A Perfect Puree is offering a free sample box of their frozen fruit purees, concentrates, and blends to professional brewers. Picked at the peak of ripeness, their fruit is pureed and frozen for optimal fresh flavor and color. Explore classics from red raspberry and blood orange to unique fruit juice blends such as Yuzu Lux Sour. Choose from 40-plus flavors and build a free sample box at perfectpuree.com/beer. That's perfectpuree, PUREE.com/beer. Complimentary to professionals only. And this episode is brought to you by Yakima Chief Hops. The 7th annual Pink Boots blend is now available for pre-order. $3 of every pound of the Pink Boots blend purchased will be donated to the Pink Boots Society, a nonprofit organization that supports women and non-binary individuals in the fermented and alcoholic industry through education. Place your orders from Yakima Chief Hops and secure your volume of this limited blend for your Pink Boots collaboration brew day on March 8th, International Women's Day. Learn more at www.yakimachief.com/pinkbootsblend. Next up in our Best in Beer Critics List edition of the podcast, joining me from New York City, my former stomping grounds, and of course, more specifically, the borough of Brooklyn, Courtney Iseman. Welcome back to the podcast, Courtney, for another edition of the Critics List podcast.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be back.
We've had a lot of great stories in the magazines, both of the magazines from Courtney this year, and we're looking forward to more next year. But due to your spot in the Northeast and as well as your travel, you got around quite a bit this year. All over the world, in fact. And so your Critics List pulls from those travels and those experiences. Where did you start in compiling your Critics List this year?
I actually did just kind of go back because I did get to a few different cities, back to some favorites, to some new ones. So I kind of just, this is maybe embarrassing, but I started by just going through my Instagram because, I don't Instagram like as much as I'm quote unquote supposed to as a writer anymore. So now it's like the beers that I'm truly like, oh my God, this is a life-changing beer that I actually post about. So I was like, oh, well, that's a cheat sheet right there.
I take exception to this idea that writers should be Instagramming or that any journalist should. I went through it a couple of years ago, pulled all of my stuff off of social media because I came to this realization that, I'm a professional. I get paid to create content, and this is what I make a living from. And when I am creating content, for Mark Zuckerberg on Instagram, he's selling ads against it. Like, right? Yeah. I'm just creating content for, these mega tech companies to sell their own ads against and make money off of what I'm creating. Like, that's pretty fucked up.
Now I'm madder about it than I already was. Yep.
Sorry, I got distracted. This is one of my personal pet issues. And of course, it's not just Instagram. It's also all of us who work for Elon Musk creating free content for X, and of course for Google and everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, you use Instagram. I use Untapped. I don't rate anything. I just use that to keep track of the beers I drink so I can go back and pull off my list and kind of try to remember the circumstance in this. So what's the first beer on your list and what made it stand out for you?
First beer is the Amaro di Malto from Oxbow. So this beer was just really striking. Shameful beer writer secret. I really only had my first proper visit to Portland, Maine this year. And going to the Oxbow tap room is obviously really special. And this beer, I happened to see it on the menu, like wasn't going to even order anything else. They were closing. And then I was like, ooh, a beer it's supposed to taste like Fernet Branca. I was like, I absolutely have to try this because that is like what you should end the night on anyway, right? It was the way that it tasted like Fernet was incredible. Like what they have done with a beer, it was like the elevated version of the like, is it cake, but for beer. It's like, oh, this is beer, but it was so complex, so many different spices, the way that like there was a touch of mintiness, but it was like really dark and lush, but not heavy. It was just absolutely perfect. And I, of course, brought like 6 bottles home.
So on trend right now between Underberg, Fernet, Malort if you're in Chicago, and that kind of Amaro focus, especially even like the folks at Burial, I know are extra focused on Amaros. Very hot right now in the beer world. Very cool. So what's second on your list?
So then we have a smoked braggot from Meal Brewery in New Orleans. And this one jumped out because like I feel like I'll always remember 2023 as the year that a lot of us in beer had a bit of an existential crisis about what we're doing here. And like so many people, I've just had this conversation over and over again this year that we want to be like re-excited and we want to have these beers that are like, sometimes you want the beer that is just there to like accompany the conversation, but sometimes you want those beers that are the conversation. And this smoked braggot, just sitting at the bar, like talking to the bartender about it, it was just it has Lapsang Souchong tea. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So again, like just really complex, layered with the smoke, touch of honey sweetness, like those botanical herbal notes in there. It was just so incredibly special.
It's funny what you say that about being excited again, and I think that we went to the lager realm in order, as a yin and yang against, the kind of excesses of beer before it, and now since we're coming back, balancing out again in another way, and still trying to find that kind of interest, and so interesting. What's next on your list?
So actually, it's funny because we go from that beer to those beers that are. I have 2 back to back that are like. Back to that kind of like very classic, like this is an essential, I will always love this beer. So this one is Renewal from Strong Rope Brewery here in Brooklyn. And it's a cream ale. And I was drinking it and I'm like, I never reach for a cream ale. But I don't know if it's like I need to be doing that more or if Strong Rope's version was just that perfect. It's just refreshing, a touch of that corn and green sweetness, a touch of like the floral herbal bitterness thing happening. But like, you could just kind of crush these and like enjoy your afternoon in Strong Rope's beautiful Red Hook tap room.
Everything I've had from them has this interesting kind of almost rustic character, which, from a urban brewery is such an interesting, kind of color to what they do. Yeah. What's next?
So then we have another just, accompany your afternoon really beautifully. This is Apparatus Cervecita Alemana from Hercules in Mexico City. So it's a German-style Leicht beer, which I don't think I've ever had even in Germany. But Hercules Brewery in Mexico, they have a lager-exclusive bar. That's sort of like their version of having a tap room in Mexico City. So that is just like, I think they have some like more complex and like, more like unique things you've never seen before on the menu. But that is like it's kind of like a house beer, like perfect refresher.
I love Liked beer, and there's one on our Best in Beers editors picks this year from KC Beer Company. But Hercules also, Josh, wrote an article or wrote a homebrew recipe for us this year. Kind of been fun to connect with those folks. Next up, you go IPA.
Yep. Yeah, this list is bouncing all over. So I think like a lot of other people, just my bar, right, for like when I'm even going to try a hazy and when I think it stands out, it just gets higher and higher, especially as we are seeing like some other trends emerge and styles re-embraced. But Fidens, I mean, I know they've, their favorites at Craft Beer and Brewing.
Such a hipster, Courtney.
But they're so good. Like their hazies really do stand out to me. Like I never get heartburn. I never get any faults or anything. And they really do get these like sugar gummy, but like not too sweet, like just really beautiful fruit flavors. It's like a lush mouthfeel. It's balanced. They do it right.
Some came to Colorado, and I got to hang out a little bit with Steve from Fidens while they were here, and I was really struck by just how nicely they balance bitterness. And yes, they're sweet as hazy IPAs, but they don't ignore the bitterness, and the structure is definitely there in these, so they don't feel like giant, murky, sweet bombs.
Exactly.
Really, really nicely structured beers.
Yeah.
Sure. What's next on your list?
So next is the Guest, which I know is a popular one. It's from Elsewhere Brewing in Atlanta, and it's a Czech style dark lager. So, really, really refreshing and has a nice dry finish, but does get into a bit of that sort of like rye bread, dark dried fruit, and a little bit of bittersweet chocolate. It like ticks every box, I think, on that style list.
Czech dark lager, still so hot right now. We're still writing our Czech fanaticism, and I don't know. Doesn't seem to be waning at all. What's next on your list?
Smoked
lager.
Oh yeah,
smoked lager.
Well, so this one is a smoked blonde ale.
Oh
yeah. Because this one is I Heard You Calling from Endless Life, also here in Brooklyn, one of my favorites. So like smoked lagers, I'm really excited because that's one of my favorite things, right? And now it's like easier to get at different places, but Endless Life I think they have done smoked lagers, but they did this blonde ale, and it was just like the subtlest little riff on the style, but just enough to sort of like catch your attention, and then you just go back to like loving that perfect like note of smoke. Like it's the right level. It's just great.
Fantastic. I just had a bunch of smoked lagers or smoked beers over the last couple days in Chicago, because there's quite a renaissance going on in smoked beer there too.
Oh yeah.
And we're here for it. I think we're all here for it.
Yeah.
Next, a extra hoppy lager.
Yep. So this is Pepperoni Castle from Smith & Lentz in Nashville. This one I feel like lived up to an especially hard test because I had it at the end of like my first full day at CBC. So just like sitting at the bar with this perfectly dry hopped Pilsner it goes perfectly with their pizzas. It's like just the right amount of like hop punch to that crisp lager. It's a gorgeous beer.
Next up on your list is a beer that we've actually run a recipe for through our All Access recipe program for All Access subscribers.
Yeah, it's a Heartbeat of the Hudson from Lasting Joy, upstate in Tivoli, New York. So this is a classic English stout, but with beets. So it has a really nice sort of like earthiness to it, and it's like bittersweet. It's a little rich, but it finishes dry. Especially if you go to their tap room, which I highly recommend, and you're just like on this farm drinking a beet stout. It's a whole moment.
Beautiful, gorgeous tap room. I mean, really stunning. I haven't been there, but they've sent me the pictures. We met Alex and Emily are the co-founders, and they came out to one of our brewery accelerator events a number of years ago. So we've been following their brewery journey along, and it's fun to watch them from the idea of a brewery to now making beer to now showing up in critics lists, watching that kind of development. It's super, super cool. What's the 10th and final beer on your critics list this year?
So this is the Stolen Pine Tree from 3 Beer, and I hope that I'm saying that correctly because their label, it kind of looks like it's a Z beer, but they are a Serbian brewery. And I had their beers all over some travels in Croatia and Montenegro. So the reason that I picked this beer is because going through Europe, I find every time I'm there, people, find out what I do for a living. If I'm chatting in a tap room, that I'm from the States, and they're like, we can't do IPAs here. And I'm like, I guess I used to agree years and years ago, maybe like the if they're comparing it to like American takes on the style, obviously, but there's a lot of breweries doing great things with the IPA, and 3 Beer, the Stolen Pine Tree is like, it's really good bitter. It's like American IPA, but leaning a little more to the West Coast style. It was really, really nice. The bitterness was like very much there.
Great IPA from Serbia. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, let's talk about what your perfect beer bar would be. Once again, like we gave a whole list of questions to all of our critics and just let you got to choose which questions you wanted to answer, and this is one that you wanted to answer. So, what makes the perfect beer bar for you?
So, for this one, I kind of Frankensteined what I love about some of my favorites in different cities. One of my favorite beer bars of all time here in Brooklyn is Beer Wax. And Beer Wax, like the whole thing is, they have thousands of records and the music is as big of a component as the beer. And I like that in a beer bar, right? Like I like if there's something else going on, maybe that would be film, or maybe there's something else that you could bring to the table. But I like sort of the fusing of different like passions and art forms against the backdrop of beer, obviously. I would want the perfect beer bar to be as thoughtfully curated as somewhere like Muted Horn in Berlin. And then just Mexico City beer bars and bottle shops, they're really, really into like education-driven conversation. You walk in, they're like, what do you like? Kind of any level of beer lover, wherever you are in your journey, would be served well by that. So there's a place called Malt Bunny that they do it really well. And I think that kind of makes a perfect beer bar experience, being able to, it's not like you're going to beer school. It's not like too like condescending, but it's just a nice chat that could introduce you to something new.
That's awesome. I did get to Beer Wax when I was there last fall, and what a cool place that is. Haven't been to the other two, but now they're definitely on my list. Most unique taproom experience this year?
So I got to Trace Brewing in Pittsburgh. And first of all, their taproom is awesome. I think it used to be a punk venue, and you can kind of still feel that. Like you can kind of still feel the vibe of there having been, shows there, and they still do, like, they're very, very events driven. They're very much like a neighborhood fixture for different, very inclusive events. So getting to sort of learn about that. They have, a cool ship room that gets used, when the weather it's hard to be an urban brewery with a cool ship, but they also use that for events. They're just were like really cool elements of that brewery. The team's really great. They have a good foeder program. So yeah, that one stood out to me.
Very, very cool. Okay, last question on your list. Most encouraging thing happening in craft beer lately?
So the other thing that I liked learning about when I got to Trace is that they have a vocational program, and that overall, that trend to me is definitely hands down the most encouraging thing. There are independent organizations, like obviously, the Michael Jackson Foundation was sort of a trailblazer there, and beer culture, but there are other, breweries like Trace now are starting their own. There's the Love a Bond program here in New York too, they're doing internships at Other Half. So yeah, they're getting underrepresented people into beer, sort of providing these educational and career placement opportunities. So that is like just the most direct and impactful way of diversifying the industry.
100%. I love watching these programs develop that create new avenues for people to connect with craft beer and connect with careers in craft beer, and that remove the barriers for them to enter this world of craft beer. Because, as we've always said, the diversity of craft beer is its strength.
Uh-huh.
Thanks for sharing with us your thoughts on your favorite beers of the year, as well as some of the trends and some of the things happening in craft beer that are resonating with you now. Courtney, it's great to have your thoughts and opinions here. Of course, if people want to read more from Courtney, you can in the pages of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine and our Brewing Industry Guide, or check out her Hugging the Bar newsletter that she produces through Substack. Courtney, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining me for this part of the episode. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks so much.
Next up, Alex Kidd. Alex, you're joining us from Southern California. It has been an amazing year in some regards. You just welcomed a new baby into the family. Also, maybe one of the worst years of your entire life.
Yeah.
You got a diagnosis back in May that has certainly changed the entire trajectory of your existence. Do you want to fill people in on what's going on?
Yeah, so the past 12 months has been a pretty crazy arc of ups and downs. New house, as you said, new baby, new cancer diagnosis in my colon, liver, and lungs, chemo and everything that comes with it. So it's been quite the ride. So as a result, I was only able to drink for 9 months out of the 12. So if you see any like glaring blind spots, that's why. Sorry, I didn't get to try Double Barrel BBT or whatever came out in like summer and onward. I was not privy to. So, don't impugn my journalistic integrity.
No worries. Your list is fantastic. readers of Craft Beer and Brewing, subscribers of Craft Beer and Brewing can go see it. And if you are not a subscriber, by the time this episode airs, people will be able to go to the website and read it on beerandbrewing.com. And I encourage them all to do that. I'm concerned about next year's list because, you need to kick this cancer, not just for your own self, family and all these other things, but just so that we can have a good critics list. However, even if you're not in drinking shape by the time next year's list rolls around, I imagine you can find a way to either crowdsource or pull it in and create something, because we would hate to break the streak that we're on. 8 years this year, Alex, 8 years in a row that you've provided a critics list to Craft Beer and Brewing, and you, me, Stan Hieronymus are the original cast for critics lists, and we're still doing it now this 8th year in a row.
Yeah. When you told me that when we were just setting up and doing prep, I was like, that can't be right, because I was still anonymous when we started doing it. It was like before the podcast, before the live shows, all that stuff. And you know what? It checks out. It does check out because I remember we met at Firestone that year and made it happen a couple months later. And it is bizarre to think of that, that arc. And in terms of next year, if people are uninitiated, they're going to be like, wow, this guy really pivoted and got into sparkling water, hop waters, really into NA beer all of a sudden, the entire list. Wow. So we'll see. I'm trying to figure out a way to pivot in the way I can to keep people entertained, and we'll figure it out as we go along.
Oh man, if it's all NA beer and hop water, that'd be amazing. I'm here for it. Let's do that next year. But for this year, let's kick in and start with your top 10 beers of the year. What's the first one on your list?
Oh man, this brewery doesn't need any more hype. I mean, speaking of breweries that have been around a while, Jester King is doing such good things in Hill Country, and you come to expect a level of quality, so that for them to exceed their own, that Jeffrey Stuffing seal of approval, this was like a beer that was so good that I not only was like, wow, that was good relative to Jester King, it was like just good relative to all American wild ales, which can tend to be too acidic, too drying. You can't finish a 750. All the trappings of the excesses of the genre. This skirted all of them. Gin barrel aged Nocturne Chrysalis. Love Nocturne Chrysalis. The gin barrel aging added this awesome eucalyptus mint sort of bergamot thing going on that actually tempered the acidity and kind of made it feel more tannic. So I very few times can I finish an entire American wild ale, and this one was easy. Amazing beer.
Also, on the other side, you mentioned this acidity and kind of, teeth and enamel melting wild ale thing. We're starting to see the other side, which is just like fruity jamminess and sweetness. And I think you're right when you meant, in the critique that you write, like what they manage is not just this kind of sweet fruit one noteness. It takes this fruit and it transforms into this, complex flavor that echoes a lot of other things from Syrah grape to, and I find that even within some of the other fruit beers as well. Anyway, gin barrels, so hot right now. There's definitely a gin barrel aged wild ale in our top 20 editors picks for beers of the year. Is it a coincidence? I don't know. But next on your list is a barley wine in that high gravity space close to your heart. Tell me about that one.
Yeah, Revolution, again, another one of these companies that I've been a supporter of for a long time, and it's fun to watch their arc and the things that they're coming up with. It feels so derivative to just reinforce their level of quality and reinforce what they're doing. But this was such a fantastic beer that I was like, I can't punish them for their successes. It's it was just that good. Their double barrel VSOJ was one of those things getting in a fight with a child. You're going to lose either way. If it comes out and it's worse than regular VSOJ, okay, you screwed it up. Or if it's better, it's well, it better be, but this really kind of took it away from the usual English candy type of realm. A lot of that, caramelized brown sugars and things like that. And it went more like Luxardo cherry, kind of it had this nice underpinning of Syrah and obviously a huge blast of cask that just brought everything together, and a slightly lower carb level, which was kind of cool to have that silky body instead of, full on effervescent.
Sure. Doing fantastic work there still. What's next on your list?
So this came out of nowhere. This brewery, I hadn't heard of them. They were literally halfway across the world in Sydney. And if the people who followed this brewery, White Bay, they know. And the Australian fan base is so rabid. They're so proud. They're one of those, countries that I'm like, okay, this is one that has their own culture, their own source of pride. I find this very heavily in particularly Sweden is this way. There's few countries that are just gung ho. Costa Rica is this way. And when they sent me White Bay Sequoia Country, they sent it to me from across the world. And the head brewer, I don't know if he's still there, so I don't want to pump him up too much, but he was a veteran of Oscar Blues and went halfway around the world, planted his flag. And, I'm okay, so this is the reverse IPA. It's been shipped the other half of the world. Instead of going around the tip of Africa, it's gone around the tip of Australia across the Pacific. So it was very strange to have an imported West Coast IPA, and it just delivered on all of the things that you look for in if you used to love back when the pre-Green Flash buyout Alpine, those bombers with the corny labels, Kern Citra, Boneyard, these are all those West Coast masters, and this falls right in that canon. It's Comet, Mosaic, Citra, nothing crazy. It's just so well executed and a callback to a time that is weirdly resurfacing.
It's so West Coast, it's East Coast again over there in Sydney, for sure.
Yeah.
Next on your list, barrel-aged stout.
Yeah, so this beer from Toppling Goliath kind of falls into the same category as Revolution, where I'm do I need to reinforce the level of quality? There are people somehow unaware, and it's always begrudging because you're padding out your list with all of these proven quantities. You look as though you're not being experimental, or you're closed-minded and you're just reinforcing a narrative of greatness. But I drank this on New Year's Eve, and it was just mind-blowing. I opened it for people who don't like beer. At New Year's Eve, you'll bring some bottles with all your normie friends, and they were this is one of the best beers I've ever had in my life. The things that the rye double barrel assassin does, it fills in a lot of the gaps of things that are too saccharine sweet, a little bit too molassesy or things in that realm, but it also reconciles it with giving this nice slight roast to it, which is more of a Scandinavian, continental European black patent malt execution. And the real kicker is the rye, because the rye gives it that. It brings those two halves together and gives it almost a Sazerac, that absinthe sort of good and plenty sort of thing it's just really, really good.
And they're not afraid of bringing some stout flavor back into even their barrel-aged stouts. So it's a nice thing to see again. Next on your list, you go back down to the South.
That's right. Nashville, Tennessee, Barrique Baltic Porter. A lot of people have been dabbling in Baltic Porters as this stout adjacent realm. And if you look at any of these lists, the biggest cliche is to just say, oh, I'm into lagers, I'm into pilsners. That's after the year of the Czech dark lager last year, it's almost become its own cringe-inducing thing of bottom fermenting elitism. This is weird because it takes all the things that people praise about clean lagers, and it ups the stakes to be can we enter a market where excess is king, but still reconcile that with the gentleness of the lager profile. And I think that threading that needle is so difficult that's what I respect, is taking a swing on these styles that are forgotten, untested, not market proven. They're going to sit on draft lines forever and being we're just going to do it extremely well. And this brings me back to those days of, I don't know if you guys remember a People's Porter, barrel-aged People's Porter, in the realm of back when barrel-aged sexual chocolate was a huge thing. It's that, but amped up. And if we were talking about good and plenties and super European execution, this feels like something that you would get from Narca. It feels like something that you would like jump across the pond to sample. And if you do like that bitter, that roast, a throwback to the days of surly darkness in a way, like a cleaner, lighter version of that. In Sweden, they have this candy called Dundersalt, which is like salted black licorice. It reminds me of Dundersalt. So again, 2 Swedish mentions in this episode.
It won't be the last either. No, we talked to Joel and Spencer from Brewing on the podcast about Brewing Wild Ales a couple weeks ago, and really like what they're doing down there. So they're getting accolades all over the place for lots of their beers. Next on your list, you're California, and it's a West Coast IPA.
Yeah, so we're going back to Oakland. East Bay has seen a little bit of a renaissance themselves. Trumer got their own tap room finally going. You know, cellar makers got a pizza joint going. Sent to Darius, bought the trap it. Like, there's a lot of stuff, like new stuff happening in the East Bay. So imagine how good a single IPA has to be to land on this list, because so many like hyper local IPAs are gonna be within 20% as good, 15%. Like, it is the most saturated, heavily entered market. But this thing is just so focused.
And adjacent to a certain, world-class, legendary West Coast IPA maker that's also selling beer into that market. So, like, you got gold standards to go by. And how do you make a name, in that kind of environment?
God, I don't envy like these small upstarts like Ghost Town. It's like they got big corporate funding dogs like Lagunitas. They got Russian River with like the giant Windsor facility, and it's like they just got to plant their flag. And this Hammer Smash Citra is so Citra forward, so simple, so focused, that people who don't like bitter IPAs that like have entered the market segment where their beer journey begins and ends with hazy IPAs, these are the types of beers that can like be approachable to them without being cloying, without having a crystal backbone of like sticky sweet malt. And this thing just goes great. It's like, it has so much like tangerine and like mandarin orange, but also like enough of that classic like green polo bottle cologne or like earthy woodsiness to it that like you can have several, which I don't think you can say for some hazy IPA purveyors.
It's 100% right. I did an episode with Justin Burt from Ghost Town, a couple months ago, and got out there to Oakland. The beers are amazing. And Ghost Town also earned themselves a spot on our editor's picks for Nose Goblin.
Yes.
Just a tremendous beer, and same kind of thing. Like, it is a double West Coast IPA, and yet it is so drinkable and so nicely balanced. Neither too bitter nor too sweet. 70 something IBUs, and yet it all just pulls together in this smooth, oily, cohesive package. Just a phenomenal brewery, and I can tell that our brewer audience out there is interested, because that episode is our 3rd most downloaded of the year. So people are paying attention. They're doing some great work out there. What's next on your list?
All right, we're going old school, jumping way across the pond, and this seems like where did this come from, like both on the list and both in the creation? I heard grumblings of this. We reported on this on Molka Tour, and I was like, I gotta try this thing. Roquefort Triple Extra. That's right, a classic OG Trappist beer, swinging on all of these like double barrel aged and gin barrel aged like wild ales. This is the first new beer that Roquefort has introduced in something like 56 years. And I was like, what are they bringing to market that they've just been sitting on and simmering? And it's such a weird merger of like Veslatron green cap, Veslatron red cap. You've got like a little pinch of like Allagash Curio going on, like some traditional triple notes. It's very hard to define. I guess you would just call it like a Belgian strong, which is kind of like a catch-all. But it's just got this like flawless carbonation, the retention, the lacing that you expect like for that cliche goblet and the photo pour. But then also it has like honeydew and jazz apple, all of these like really bright flavors and a little pop of esters, which you almost never get unless you're just drinking not barrel-aged, not fruited, traditional Saison. Like, people have moved so far away from that clove and like those, like, you know, what they used to call it, like bubble gum. Like, that was the old standby. But it has all of that packed into a not barrel-aged, just straight up Belgian gem. Like, it represents like so many of the best parts of that entire segment.
When we were over in Belgium last February 2022, we had some, cafe over there, and yeah, it's fun to try. You're right. Change doesn't come that often, but man, we forget in the United States just how powerful triple as a style is. Like, that is the beer everyone drinks in Belgium. Like, it's just that's just beer, you know, that and Jupiler, but that's a whole other thing. What's next on your list?
All right, we're jumping back to Michigan. Waxwings, these plucky little upstarts in Kalamazoo. Speaking of people that have to live in the shadow of giants in their backyard, they have eked out such a cool barrel-aged program. I've done some lurking. I look and see. I'm always curious, too, about the culture of what surrounds a brewery. And this has like genuinely like Michigan locals who chime in. Like, you get the feeling that these are not profiteers who are like just trudging in from Indiana to score some bottles to flip. They had a great community, and this beer, Heights, is a double mash single barreled stout. And on paper, okay, Weller 12, whatever. Like, you know, it's like all of that sounds like you're just checking boxes on things that are industry standards that will get you to the hype level. But the cool thing about this is it goes a lot of dark fruit. It goes a lot of like Fig Newton and date, which you don't tend to see. You almost see that more in certainly in quads and certain barrel-aged barley wines. But it was so cool because it was not what I was expecting. And it felt intentional. It felt like they were servicing a market that wanted one thing, that wanted brownie batter, and like to give a curveball that was just like this warming and gentle. It was really, really well done.
Nice. What's next?
All right. So this is one of those like, he brews out at 12%. So like, it's, you know, like the same thing with Timber Ales and a bunch of people brewing out at 12% in North Haven, Connecticut. But the brewery is brand spanking new. In fact, this was the first can run that they did right out the gates. I got their first beer. This is Eredita, and this is their Papa Pils, named after Chris Papayo's father. And it's like, okay, he just chose to send Pilsner. Like, a kind of a bold move. Usually the boxes I get are packed with, you know, like double waxed, you know, like stuff like, you know, like that really, really seek to try
your tagline is stay high gravity. And so like, it's not a giant surprise that, you know, that people send you those beers. But here you are trying to appeal to the lager elite with a lager pick right here.
Right, exactly. But
shamelessly appealing.
Pandering. Here I was just dunking on them, and I've got two on my list, if you count the Baltic Porter. But this beer, like, you can see the chops that Chris picked up from all his years in Hill Farmstead. He brought that skill set, put his own spin on it. Too often, like modern American Pilsners, like, they're afraid and they overhop it and they get into this IPL, this Italian zone, because they want people to have that comfort, that familiarity, or they're applying a lacquer veneer to kind of fill in the gaps of any potential off flavors, or if there's something that wasn't quite right. This is more stripped down. It's less hoppy. It's almost like it wants to lead with the Grand's biscuit, the water cracker, you know, like a lot of those like light effervescent challah profile I don't know if is this a super regional product? The Hawaiian rolls, those Hawaiian sweet rolls.
Do you know what I'm talking about? King's Hawaiian rolls out here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Sometimes I'll reference something and I wonder, is that a Colorado west of the Mississippi thing? Like what? But it went that realm, and I was just like, wow, this is the sheer like effortless like crushability of these, but while maintaining like control and having like a very satisfying complexity. It was just really well done.
You have one more beer on your list. Actually, you have two more, but we'll get to that one later on. The last of your top 10.
So this is a team up. Microphone teamed up with Goose Island, which if you told me 8 years ago when I was first on the show that, that 8 years ago, 2015, we were like 3 years into the InBev buyout, like people were like, they would never collaborate with Goose Island, but Microphone did, and they didn't make a Coca-Cola beer. They didn't put like Earl Grey tea in it or zested clementines. Like they made a straight up, no frills, amazing barley wine. It's not wax dipped. It's not hyped. It comes in just a 16-ounce can. I had no idea what I was in for with this. The double LP side B is perhaps the best beer that I've had from Microphone. And ironically was even better than like the already phenomenal, the Old Fitzgerald barley wine that came out from Goose Island in this last calendar year as well, which was like $50. And this is just unceremoniously in just like a blue and white can. So it really blew me away. It just had so much saturation. It picked up so much from the barrels. The almond roca and like just all of these like kind of like a chocolate chip pancake sort of thing going on, like not with the maple, like no maple, no coffee. Don't think any of that realm, but like Madeira, like just dark fruit. It was just so phenomenal. And I love when things catch me off guard because honestly, I was like, if this is going to Goose's market, they're going to have to satisfy a different type of consumer. But they brought both halves of what they excel at and just crushed it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. If you could share a beer with one figure in brewing, who would it be?
Man, well, as we discussed up top, I have, been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And so the immutability and value of time is on the forefront of my mind. We talk so much about time in terms of like aging, casking, entitlement to how much time you spent in line and, all of these different concepts of time. And I started thinking, I'm going to butcher his name. So this is going to like pronunciation, I hope doesn't take away from it. But I was thinking about what influenced me, what changed my palate, what guided me as counterpoints and something that I used as a North Star. And Haj Vilterson, the founder of Narke Kulturbryggen, I never got to meet him. He sadly passed away. And he not only helped define the European scene for strong ales and stouts, but like really was like a compass for getting back to the degree of balance. Like in the American profile, you had things that were like a little bit on the too thin side, like Central Waters and those sort of things. And then you clearly were in no shortage of Floridian excess. But this brewery always from the mid 2000s, tearing up rate beer, like on through the 2010s, every time a Coggan dropped, people were like, oh my God, which Coggan is it? And it was all like, I drank 2 Coggans, the Konjaks, and then the regular Coggan Stomskapora, on my wedding day in 2013. And so it's just something that like has always been near and dear to my heart. And I never got to talk to him about time. And it's just something that I reflect on a lot about like how little time that we may or may not have, and then the value of it. So, yeah.
I don't know how where we go from there, but I think you're right. It certainly pulls into perspective the things that we value, but also, the importance of all of those of us that play on this media side, you know, in keeping some of these influential folks who might otherwise not be on the tips of everyone's tongues. There are a lot of brewers out there, and it's our job to really what you're doing is writing them into the canon as we think about these beers in the future, and he becomes that kind of influential point, and deservedly so. And so we will keep that memory going. We've got a couple of questions after this that I think people should just go to the website, go to the magazine, subscribe to the magazine and read. But I want to ask you about the most encouraging thing that you see happening in craft beer today.
So this has been market wide for most luxury consumables in the post-COVID era. we're still in the COVID era, but you know what I mean, post-lockdown era. And it is the cratering of the secondary market. We saw an influx of some people had discretionary income in 2020 and 2021. No matter what you're into, be it watches, wine, sports cards, Pokemon, like anything that was in that realm of collectibles or things, like they took a huge spike. Everything was jumping through the roof. And, as we're seeing this subside, and it's really hit a lot of these like speculative profiteers like hard. You're seeing a lot of these prices slide. Even bourbon now is sliding back down, and it's so awesome to see. Like, honestly, I love it. Fuck those people who just like sit on things as a commodity, particularly like consumables, because they have a shelf life, they have a life, they're meant to be enjoyed. It's so satisfying to see the secondary market go away for a million different reasons. Beer is notoriously underpaid workers. There's always wage issues, healthcare, things like that. So to see people making like, $1,000, like flipping whatever, the product of somebody else's work just by virtue of their access to it, like that's garbage. The idea that like there's gatekeeping and people won't have access to them. It limits people's experiences, and their experiences shape their palates and the things that they seek out. So they don't have counterpoints. If there are the air quotes best things, they never get to try those. So that's garbage. Like every aspect of these things is bringing it back in so that locals can buy local releases. People are forced to drink the beers they buy. That's what I love more than anything. It's like, oh, you're showing up, you're loading up on all of these Fittins cans. You got like 20 cases of Treehouse. If you love barrel-aged barley wine so much, guess what? Now they're worth like a fraction of what they were. So go ahead, drink them up. Like it forces them to do what beer is meant to do. That is enjoy the present, because it's a living, enduring, fleeting product that ties back into our idea of the value of time. It's so good for so many reasons, except for if that's your side hustle. Like, and I don't really feel bad for those people. Like, so
I am 100% there with you. I think that, there's this wonderful factor that more and more breweries everywhere, not just in the United States, but around the world are making better and better beer. And it is possible to get fantastic examples of whatever you want: barrel-aged stout, hazy IPA, West Coast IPA. These beers now are available fresh and local in most places at a very high level of quality. That's a beautiful thing. And I think, some of the brewers on the hypier side of years past have always said to me that, like, what they hated about the secondary market, was how it changed people's expectations for what they made. And when you make a beer that you sell for $40 a bottle and someone sells it for $400, and the person drinking it's rating it as a $400 thing. Yeah. Rather than, and then while the brewery made it and sold it as a $40 bottle. And those are very different scales, and there's very different expectations, and what brewer wants to have to live up to, like, making something that they are, that they feel is worth that. Like, it is an amount of pressure and a weird level of expectation that just no one wants on this. And so I think you're right. Open those bottles with people that you enjoy, with people you want to share special experiences with. If you have something that's rare, the bottle, expensive bottle or whatever on secondary, it's not that it has some transcendent taste. It tells, people that you're drinking it with, who know what you're drinking, that you are valuable to them and that they care about you. And it's they want to have this experience with you. That's the only value I find in any of that kind of thing. And it's nice now, you're right, as you say, to be able to just do those things together without this pressure and without anyone else taking their cut of it on a shitty secondary market.
And in a weird way, you made a great point. We have so much local access. You don't need to trade. But also, like, the trading has entered like an actual trading renaissance where you just like the stakes are so much lower. You don't like look at like your bottle of like Wakefield Bake Kujira and go like, oh, like how much is this worth? Or, this is the gunmetal Bake, it's sold for $600. So I need exactly $600 in secondary units. Otherwise, like or even worse, like the classic.
How many points, Alex?
The points trades, like all that. Like now it's like, yeah, I got this thing. you have a thing like it's lower stakes, so you're more able to try things. You're more able to experiment because like you don't have to do a 7 for 1 trade and put all your eggs in this basket. And if Aaron Grand Cru is not like the best thing, you're not out 500 prospective dollars. And the even worse version of this is like the St. Louis special, where you like gather together a bunch of things and then you just trade it for a fungible Buffalo Trace antique collection or something. Like it's like so transparent. You're like, I know you're never going to open a bottle of Sazerac 18. You have no intention of opening it. You just want to consolidate and liquidate and like do this cash out essentially. And that's even more hilarious. But yeah, so just in general, a lot of facets to it, but it's awesome to watch it collapse.
Beer for bourbon trades. It feels like so 2018. I mean, aren't we past that now? Anyway, well, let's wrap this up with the one last beer on your list. I asked all of you all to nominate a beer for our 20 editors picks for 20 best beers of the year. You sent us a beer that from a brewery that we had on our list last year for our editors picks, the top 20. And so we did not choose this as an editors pick for the top 20. But because you felt so strongly about it, we left it in your critics list. What's the beer?
So everybody's going to eye roll and go 2 Decorah stouts in one list. Trust me, I know who I am, and I don't like it any more than you do. But I also can't penalize them because they both live in this small Iowa town. It's Pulpit Rock, of course. I'm sorry if you're one of the other 4 breweries. Like, well, wait a second. What do you mean, of course? No, Venskap. This is pastry stout, like through and through. And coconut, vanilla, hazelnut. It sounds like once things veer heavily into like the Starbucks drink realm, like where you're like, all right, so this is a genre that is saturated in more ways than one, literally and economically. But what they did was they double barrel aged it 36 months, and it doesn't taste like some milk stout that's just like had a bunch of things piled onto it. It was weird. Like none of the 3 very dominant ingredients took over in the way that sometimes Horus beers can be very coffee forward, very hazelnut forward, or some, Goose Island beers can just be sheet cake, vanilla, boom, that's it. That's what you get. This was somehow kept all 3 of those balls in the air and juggled it. And it just was so satisfying and so delicious that I was like, something so good when it compels self-loathing, like where you're like, I shouldn't drink this whole bottle, even if it is like, a smaller format. Like if you've ever like been in that situation, like, that like what you're at, like if you look at the serving size and it's super small on the container, it's about to be like amazing. Versus like a serving of spinach is like the entire plastic thing. And you're like, I could never finish that much spinach in my life. Like that was this beer where you're like, this is so over the top and horrible for me, but like, I don't care. I want even more of it.
They build this beautifully indulgent, but also like cleverly structured, approach where, again, there's no such thing as too much sweetness as long as it's balanced in the nice and in the appropriate kind of way. And they are certainly pushing some boundaries on that. But Bob and Tef are doing some amazing work. And especially when it comes to, the nuts, they just seem to have an artistry when it comes to using nuts in stout.
That they robbed me of my dismissive elitism. So that's kind of like, I really got to knock the beer for that, because I don't get to look down on people who drink coconut, vanilla, hazelnut if I myself am painted in their cloth. So that I do take off points for that, for my own self-esteem.
Well, yeah. Alex, appreciate you taking time out of your chemotherapy schedule, to talk with us of all the things that are probably not that important in life. Talking about a critic's list of beer for a beer podcast and magazine, maybe not, the primary, thing that you're focused on these days as you're trying to, kick cancer and get back into it. But I appreciate you making time to fill us in on what's going on, to share your thoughts for beers. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for having me, even though I only did 3/4 of the work.
Well, I'm looking forward to next year's NA and Hopwater list, and hopefully that's only half of the list, and that you get to a point where you get past this cancer, you kick its ass, and you get back into the world of beer drinking. Because speaking for all of us that have loved reading and listening to all the content that you've made over the last decade plus, we need you.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right, cheers, Alex. Thanks.
Cheers.
And for our final Critics List segment, Joe Stange joined me, remote from Bangkok, Thailand. Welcome back to the podcast, Joe. Of course, we just talked last week for our Best in Beer issue, and we talked each other's ears off going into what is best in beer, both from our editorial perspective and from our readers' perspective. But in this list, you get to share your own personal perspective. All other inputs be damned. So let's talk about your top 10 beers. Personal top 10 beers of 2023.
All right. Well, the first one on this list comes from, I think, one of my favorite beer experiences that I had all year. We were in Czech Republic, and I think my favorite bar that I went to all year was this one called Polt, recommended by Evan Rail. And it was really cool because they were monomaniacal about the draft system there. They had, of course, the Lucre side poles, but even more than that, there was like temperature control on the pipes and all these other things going on there. It was just impressive to look at. But what mattered, of course, was in the glass. And what I kept going back to, go ahead, you want to interject?
I just want to interject here because you're not telling the full story here. Polt, there's a couple of things going on there, like joint venture between the guys from Locale and Matushka. Because they are so well respected in beer service in Czechia. Like, they are one of the only places in the entire country where you can get both Pilsner Urquell and Budvar, Czechvar on tap at the same place. I mean, that is like oil and water in the Czech Republic. The menu itself, absolutely amazing. I can't stop telling brewers the story of this. Like, you walk in there, they've got this lighted yellow sign on the wall, kind of like, sign style, with stuff put up. Anyway, bright yellow backlit. And they've got 6 beers by name on it. They're all pale lager. All 6 of them are Czech pale lagers. And then below it, they have 3 other beer options. They have APA, American Pale Ale. They have IPA, and they have sour. They don't tell you what those beers are. They'll tell you what each of the 6 pale lagers are by name. And if you want an APA, we have one of those. I don't know what it is this month, but here it is. It is the most amazing thing to recalibrate your expectations around beer. But yes, an incredible experience. I went with you at least 2 out of the 4 times you went.
I kept going back, and the experience was part of it, of course, and it just absolutely perfectly poured beers in perfect condition. But this beer also was the reason I kept going back. It was nicely bitter, 52 IBUs, but smooth as hell, like creamy texture on there. It's an 11-degree Svetli, so it's less than 5%, and I was almost like trying to prove, yes, you really can drink it all night, and then again the next night. Anyway, wonderful beer. It's Hendrick H11. I had never heard of that brewery until we went to Polt, and I'm glad I know about it at least. But I can't wait to get back to Prague again and just hang out in Polt and wallow in that place.
You're a sucker for high. If you can get Joe a over 50 IBU Pilsner, you will become his new best friend. I'm just saying. Maybe I'm throwing the challenge out there to brewers that are listening. But if you want Joe to be your new best friend, you just make him a Pilsner that's over 50 IBUs. And man, just watch.
Hey,
all right, what's next on your list?
Yeah, I just Hans's Pils could have been on this list too. I had it this year also at the Flying Saucer bar at Dallas Airport twice. Anyways, that's another.
So predictable. Predictable.
So this other one, man, I really enjoyed this one, and I know you guys are in Colorado. You get Great Divide is everywhere. Great Divide's been around a long time, but this Laws barrel-aged Yeti was so fun for me. It kind of felt like a throwback, American Imperial Stout throwback. You know, we talk about beer flavors in some of these barrel-aged beers, and this one is so beery still, and still has kind of that old no-nonsense bitterness to it, but there's also plenty of roast, the espresso, dark cocoa nuts. There's that whiskey barrel depth. The beer is well attenuated for what it is, so it doesn't feel heavy and sweet. It just, I don't know, it's just really delicious. It was fun to drink. I kept going back to it, and I was just really enjoyed it. And you know, at the end, there it is. It just ends up on the list at the end of the year.
Sometimes classic feels tired, and sometimes classic feels, where have you been for the last several years? And I'm so glad to embrace you again. And this beer, I think, was definitely the latter on that. What's next on your list?
So I got one from Sapwood Cellars, which they were in our top 20 last year. And this was a bottle. I'm pretty sure I picked it up when I was there at the brewery last year, and ended up. I think it was in the cooler on the farm, and then I went back this summer and then packed some bottles back here. So I ended up tasting it here pretty recently, but it's there are no edges. It's big Flemish red inspired, 10% ABV, but this is another mixed fermentation creation out of Sapwood Cellars. And I just love what they're doing over there. Big flavors. You got the acidity. It's punchy. You got some like a dried berries middle through it. But it's so light on its feet, this beer. It was like so drinkable for 10%. Crazy. Raspy dry finish. The balance was just right. It was just like, I mean, there's just some magics going on over there. So really enjoyed that one. Sapwood Cellars.
Some of the most creative beers that I've had over the last couple of years, but also beautifully grounded. I agree. Phenomenal work from them. The next one on your list was also a beer of the year last year. Joe, you're repeating yourself.
Yeah, I don't do that on purpose, but with the beer made a strong impression again. I was just really loved drinking it, and this is from Otherlands. It's the Halleluja Special. It's their Polish-inspired Pilsner. It's light, 4.4% ABV. It does not taste light. It's got, like we were talking about last week, it's got some of that malt depth to it. There's a little bit of heft. It's not heavy, but there's heft. And you're getting this brioche-like malt cookie character in it that reminds me of sticking my nose in Krug's full of Keller beer in Franconia. It's just, Ben's got that going over there. He and I, we share a love for the Franconia lager, and I love getting him to go down those rabbit holes over email where we get into these technical details. It's really fun talking to Ben Howe about lager, and but his passion for that and for the details really comes through in these beers. And so get to Otherlands if you haven't. Just a great place, great beers.
I enjoy this Best in Beer season just because Ben throws a box in the mail to the office here, knowing that you're going to be here for it, so that we can enjoy some of these beers together. And you're right, they are they're just there's just something else, and you can tell that like Ben's passion. You're right, for Franconian lager is super rich there, and it's not just academic. Like there's both this technical studied piece of it, and also like he gets that deep feels, those deep vibes, and has been actively reverse engineering the Franconian magic now in his own beers. Anyway, I could go on forever about that. What's next on your list?
Yeah, so this was a throwback, and it's going to be a beer that maybe some of you grew up with. I did not. We didn't get a lot of port beers in Missouri when I was a young college kid and moving on beyond that. But Shark Attack, I also really love this style, like these big West Coast Imperial Reds. Lots of hops, lots of malt. It's just really fun to get all those knobs turned up. It just kind of reminds me of the early days getting into craft beer. But also beautiful to look at, right? Like shining crimson jewels in the glass, nice foam. I was getting like caramel, orange peels, caramel malt middle hug there, and as you're drinking it, and then a little fruit punchy character that I don't know the hops. I sometimes get like a Hawaiian fruit punch thing from Simcoe. I don't know if that's what it is. Don't know. But then, yeah, I mean, it's bitter, it's resinous, but there's enough body and alcohol there to make it all work. And man, what a fun beer! And that actually got exported to Thailand. I drank that here. That was cool, and it was in great shape. Like, yeah. So, thanks for sending beer to Thailand, Port.
If people want to bring hoppy red ales back, I'm here for it. Let's do this. I want more. What's next on your list, Joe?
Yeah, side project from Maplewood, Missouri, St. Louis. This was La Belle Fleur, and I don't remember where I drank this, which is not normal for me. Usually, I've got like a good head for that. It may have been in the tap room because I got to visit that tap room this summer, and that was weirdly a long time coming for me because as we were in Missouri for a couple of years, moving there 4 years ago, and I thought one of the things I was most looking forward to was going to Side Project and hanging out in the tap room and drinking what they got. Pandemic, damn it, kept it away. They were closed for a while, and then timing didn't work out after that. So this summer, finally, I was able to get in there and spend some time with a couple fellow, geek friends and really geek out at the at the Side Project tap room, which is the thing you have to do at some point in your life if you're a beer lover, particularly if you love big stouts and mixed fermentation. Anyway, this is La Belle Fleur is more in the mixed fermentation realm for sure, but it's a Brett beer, and it's just, man, it was just perfect. That word isn't particularly helpful, but there was like apricots, fuzzy peaches, lime wedges, getting the white wine notes. The precision though was in the flavor of it. Gently tart. It was dry. It was crisp. It was just like so much going on. A lot goes into making it, and yet it was the kind of thing you could have multiple glasses of. So they get so much attention for the stouts, but in my view, those mixed culture beers and funky stuff has just been getting better and better and better the longer they go on.
Speaking of funky, the next beer on your list is also in that funky category.
It is, and this is another that I got exported to Bangkok. But this is from De Garde in Tillamook, Oregon. This was the Trio. This is their 3-year spontaneous blend. This was gin barrel aged. So there's another gin barrel aged, which we were talking about last week. Another gin barrel aged mixed firm beer. And man, it just works. Like juicy, musty. I was getting crushed oranges, rose petals, musty old books, but in the wine cellar, right? Like, I don't know. I love when Brett goes that direction. It's so fun and works so well, and nice acidity to it, low earthy bitterness, dry, lively, just really, really fun to drink. And I got to share a bottle of that with friends here, and it was really, really cool. Nice.
Lager's next on your list.
Yeah, so this was from our little side trip over to Germany. We got to go into a cool pub in Bamberg called the Pelican. Really great spot. A couple of my favorite spots in Bamberg have sadly closed. The Torchester, man, love that place. It's gone now. I'm not going to go on about it. The Pelican, great spot. If you get a chance and you're in Bamberg, you got to make some time for the Pelican too. And they had a beer from Heckel. And I love getting to know these little beers from breweries from the Franconian countryside. It's really a big part of the fun of going there. It starts with a smoked beer, then you get into Keller beer, and then you just like, it's a deep topic, and you could want to keep going back for the rest of your life. Heckel is a little brewery. I went there with my friend Michael James. He was somebody I had known from Rate Beer way back in the day, but we stayed in touch. Fantastic beer photographer too, beer tourist. He sadly passed away a few years ago. Some of you may have known him. But I went to Heckel with Mike, and I remember, I have to tell the story, sorry. There's a bunch of locals. Nobody knows Heckel unless you know Heckel. It's all locals. And they asked what we were doing there, and I said, "Wir sind Biertouristen." We are beer tourists. And this guy, this big guy's facing the other direction, who's a local guy, obviously not enthused about us being there, about outsiders being in their local, just goes, just this audible groan of distaste at foreigners finding their favorite little spot. Anyway, Heckel is a fantastic Franconian take on the Helles, where they call it a Vol beer hell. It's full. I mean, Vol beer isn't just a marketing word in this case. It's got a fullness to it. It's big, it's hefty, but not heavy, if that makes sense. It's got that malt backbone, but it is fun to drink. It's got a lemony herbal hop character, earthy bitterness to it. To me, it is got a classic kind of Franconia taste to it. It was fun to get to drink that beer and to remember Mike and to be back in Bamberg and all of that.
The next on your list is another beer that we both drank at the same time. I love that we were sharing so much of these beer experiences together.
Yeah, this was in San Diego during HomebrewCon, and this was a bucket list thing for me too. But we got to go up to McElhenney, and that was really cool to get up there and to have some of those beers. And man, they're great. I mean, they're everything that people say they are. McElhenney beers, man. Awesome IPAs. There's a reason that, Alpine came out of there and they've inspired so many others, even though it's such a small spot and it feels out of the way when you're there. It's well worth the short detour out of San Diego if you're around. The beer is Bestest Buds. I also loved the Months. Their Nelson IPA, but I really enjoyed this one. I think just even a bit more. It had an adultness to it. Just an austerity. It was like you're getting the bright citrus and some pear-like esters, but also just like bitter, dry, pine needles, the little bit of diesel that you're looking for, that I like to look for in a proper West Coast IPA. I guess it was lighting up all those West Coast IPA brain centers for me. It's like, this is it. This is what I came to California for. It was just bright and excellent. Loved it.
Awesome. Agree. Amazing brewery and amazing beers. What's the last beer on your personal top 10 list?
Yeah, so I got to get a Thai beer on here and to represent Team Thailand. But I think it's not a dishonest thing to do when I drink a lot of beer in Thailand, and I am fascinated by what's going on with craft beer here, which is growing even though it's clandestine. It's basically illegal to start a small brewery. I want to write about that pretty soon. So hopefully I don't want to go into a ton of detail on the podcast and make this even longer, but this beer was from one of these semi-clandestine, let's say, local craft brewers, Haplab, Kuhn Pitch, if you're listening, man. Nice job on this beer. Watermelon chili ale. Again, I'll talk about throwback. Like, it's not a sour beer. The chili actually was pretty subtle. He's using Carolina Reaper, but it's just like a kiss. It's just an accent. Although Thai food may have thrown out my capsaicin threshold considerably. But it's a blonde ale with lots of watermelon in it. And it balances, in this way it's old school, it balances the beer and the fruit. You're getting that like toothsome, juicy watermelon, but you're also getting the beer. And it's like you're getting the fun of the fruit, little sweetness, and it finishes dry. Really fun to drink. I actually went back and ordered more. And it's when you can do that with a chili beer or fruit beer, like you're doing well. So really enjoyed that beer. And that was at a really cool bar also called 8 Days a Week. Great selection of local beers. If you get to Bangkok, go check it out.
When I hear watermelon chili beer, I think that is a line killer. Like, that is everything that you're going to need to replace that draft line for, all in one beer. But God bless them for that. That's awesome.
You might as well smoke it too, right? Sure. Yeah. Make a smoked chili watermelon beer. Yeah.
Just leave it on that line. Don't even bother. The line should travel with that keg from now on. Anyway, is what it is, but very, very cool to see, craft beer in Thailand bubbling up like that. We're going to skip your ingredient and your bucket list questions. If people want to see those, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, become a subscriber, or open up your print or your PDF email, or open up the app, the Craft Beer and Brewing app, and read Joe's critics list within any of those options. But let's go right forward and talk about your perfect beer bar, Joe.
Yeah, this was a fun question. So as an editorial team with our writers, we come up with a bunch of cool questions, and then this year we just went with the ones we thought were more interesting to answer. And it's like, man, Perfect Beer Bar is a fun one.
We kind of left it open to everyone. Like, these are some of the questions. Choose the ones you like, that you have a good answer for, and make those answers. This question was actually one that Samir Kadari, posed to you and me, forwarded us the Orwell piece, Moon Underwater, put it back on our radar and got us thinking about that. We love beer bars. What would we what would we turn into our perfect beer bar? And it's a little different for all of us. But it's an interesting thought exercise to engage in there, just like Orwell did back in the 1940s.
Yeah. So I mentioned Torchester earlier, a great bar in Bamberg that closed, unfortunately, a couple of years ago. That reminds me also, there's another really great one in Berlin that's going to close really soon called Forster's Fine Beer. I got to give it a shout out now, because if you're going to be in Berlin in the next few months, get there now. But that also applies to any of the great beer bars that you love. All great beer bars are temporary, even though sometimes they feel permanent, and sometimes they can even last for generations. It's still going to be temporary. So if you got a place you love and you love to get to, don't wait. Go there, go back, support it, because you gotta enjoy those things while you can. Life's short, man, and so are the lives of beer bars. My perfect one, I think, partly inspired by Torchester for sure. It's going to be small. It's going to be comfortable. It's going to be chatty. You're going to be having conversations with strangers or people who also love beer as much as you do. It's not a place you come to eat, so you have dinner somewhere else or lunch somewhere else. Maybe there's some snacks though to keep you going on the beers. I don't care if it's local beers I prefer if you got some local options, but it could be a stunning list of imports, whatever, as long as they're great and they're the kind that just want to keep you there, want you to stay there. And then the other dimension for me is the music. I think like Torchester, for example, and Gist in Brussels is another one, but audiophile type bars where they've just got this awesome record collection and playing records for you over like a pristine sound system, and to get like lost in hi-fi sounds while drinking some great beers, whiling away an evening, man. Like there's just not much better than that. So there it is. There's my perfect beer bar.
We've got some great memories of drinking a Gist, and ones that I won't forget anytime soon. Totally agree with you on that. And I love the music element to that. Nonetheless, Joe, I'll catch you soon. Take care. Cheers.
Awesome. Cheers.
For years, G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across the country. BSG and HVG bring you a Mira, the ideal hop for those looking for the traditional flavor of a classic German lager. Flavor your lineup and streamline your sourcing by heading over to oldorchard.com/brewer. ProBrew currently features short lead times between 2 and 4 weeks for their in-stock Pro-Fill rotary can fillers. Omega stylized yeast are a new tool for brewers to bring intense guava and passion fruit aromas out of your malt and hops. Join the craft beer community in Sacramento March 12th through 14th for the California Craft Beer Summit. Build your complimentary sample box today at perfectpuree.com/beer, and $3 per pound ordered of the YCH Pink Boots blend will be donated directly to the Pink Boots Society. If you've enjoyed this episode, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, make sure that you can read this Best in Beer issue of the magazine in its entirety, because there is plenty more there that we have not covered through these podcasts, and you don't want to miss that, do you? You don't want to be behind. You've got to know what everybody thought, like the other 5 questions that Stan answered on his critics list this year. And of course, if you're a subscriber, you can also look at what he wrote last year and the year before. And 8 years now, Stan. This is 8 years that we've been doing critics lists.
I've lived in 3 different states in that period.
Yeah. You, Alex Kidd, and me were the 3 that have written our lists, and it's fun to watch how those have evolved over the years. And it'll be interesting when we look back in another 8 or 10 years to think that's what beer was when we were.
Yeah. It's already embarrassing.
It's experience. Okay. It's just experience. This is how it goes. We can't judge. That's who we were and what we were drinking and what beer was at the time. And there it is. If you're a brewery and planning, go to breweryworkshop.com. Check out information about our Austin Brewery Accelerator next March. Austin, Texas. We're going to come down there. And, if you are thinking about opening a brewery, it's a great resource to check out, help you understand what you don't know that you don't know. Again, Stan, let's go eat some Mexican Chinese food here in Mexicali and then drink some Mexican beer at the Mexicali MXL Beer Fest, the longest beer fest I have ever seen. It starts at 2:00 in the afternoon and it finishes at 1 a.m. in the morning, an 11-hour straight beer festival. I mean, the idea of that's got to make American brewers cringe, right?
Right.
Thanks to all of our critics for joining me for this episode, and we will be back next year with another 2-part series on Best in Beer. In the meantime, send us those beers. Tell us what you love, and we will catch you next week with another new episode. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media @Craft Beer Brew.